Well, it's about that time of year that I give you all a spring tour of our 20 by 40 simple and abundant backyard garden. Right now it's the beginning of June and we are located in zone 4 and we live in the state of Wisconsin. In my opinion, spring garden tours are almost more valuable than garden tours where you can see everything coming into harvest. The reason for that is because you can kind of see the infrastructure and how the garden is laid out. The philosophy we use here on our homestead is to grow as much food as we possibly can to get us up to the next growing season. When my wife and I make our grocery list, we go down the list and say, what can we grow, what does well here, and what preserves really well. If you watched my garden tour I did last summer, you saw that everything was growing up. Everything was huge and abundant and green and lush, and it was really, really cool. But now you have the opportunity to see everything, what it looks like months before that occurs. Right now I'm standing in the middle of our garden, right at the 20-foot mark. So we've got 20 feet of garden over here, 20 feet over here, and the path I'm standing on is 20 feet long. Let me show you a better view to give you a better perspective of this garden. From this vantage point, you can see this much better. We have 20 feet leading up to the center path here, 20 feet there, and then this path that I was just standing on is also 20 feet. We use the permaculture deep litter method for our chickens over here. So our garden feeds the chickens, the compost they create goes back and feeds the garden. We're gonna start over here with this side of our garden by those grow bags, work our way down this way. Now, if you saw this last year, everything was crazy and grown up, but now you get to see what it looks like 2 months before that happens. So to give you more perspective, this is the north side of the garden, which is why we grow our potatoes here. We also grow our potatoes here because they're in grow bags, which is a lot easier. We like grow bags because we can dump them on a tarp or in a wheelbarrow or a bucket or something at the end of the season, pull out the potatoes, put the soil back in the grow bags for next year. It's a really efficient way without having to disturb the soil either in the ground or in one of the raised beds. The other reason why we grow potatoes in grow bags right here in this location is because we're on top of our septic tank. The best way I know to use space is to grow things vertically, like on a cattle panel trellis, as well as grow things below them. And in this case, we have 5 by 4 raised beds, meaning it's 5 feet this way and 4 feet deep. And we have 3 of them, 1, 2, and 3, each with cattle panels above them. So in this first small 5 by 4 raised bed with the cattle panel going above it, we have spaghetti squash, 3 plants on each side. So we also have celery down here, and we will like to have at least 1 celery plant per week. I believe I planted 56 this year, and that way we can take 1 plant out of the freezer each week. Here's the top-down view. Got celery back here. We have 2 pepper plants up there. They're very small yet. We've got some petunia flowers there, and we have our spaghetti squash growing. They're about 18 inches tall. Those will eventually grow up and occupy this space right up here, and then we can harvest them probably around September. In the middle, small 6-inch raised bed right here with the cattle panel trellis, we have our lettuce. This is purposely put here because it's going to be on the north side of whatever is growing in front of it. In this case, I planted a zucchini plant, which is doing okay. On the sides, we have green beans. Those are rattlesnake green beans. I saved all those seeds from last year. To give you a top-down view, we have lettuce right here. That's our zucchini plant. A lot of space around it. Of course, those get really big. We've got some petunia flowers and then our green beans on the side that'll eventually grow up this trellis right here, and we'll be picking them as they dangle all around. When I do a garden tour in August, it's going to be a jungle here. All of these crops are going to be growing up. Everything inside the raised beds are just going to be huge and tall and pushed together. It looks like we have a lot of space now, but these plants are going to grow out. They're going to grow together, and it's going to completely change the way this looks right now. This last raised bed, again, I've got some spaghetti squash over here, and in the middle of this raised bed right here, we have carrots. We're growing a ton of carrots this year in multiple different places in the garden. One of my top 5 survival crops. It's a great plant to have in the middle. We also have a volunteer potato. We get one every year in this raised bed. So those were the 3 raised beds with the cattle panels. On the outside of the garden right here, we have more rattlesnake green beans, as you can see, growing up this 4-foot field fencing. And my garden, as usual, has log borders on the outside just to keep some separation from the garden, from the grass, from the lawn. And we also planted some marigolds right here. Those are eventually going to bloom, I would imagine, within the next week or 2. Once these grow up, this field fencing here, which is 4 by 2 inch field fencing, just extra stuff we have from doing chickens and other things over the year on our homestead. This is going to go across right here. These are natural limbs that we find in the woods or we cut from trees that we use for firewood. And this is another extension, another good use of space. It's kind of a mini raised bed. I put some cedar fence pickets back here to separate the wood chips from this area right here. I put in some nice raised bed garden soil, and we use wood chips. We get them for free from the city depository, and everywhere in our garden where we use access points or walk around or use the wheelbarrow, we put down wood chips with cardboard underneath to suppress the weeds. You're not going to find many weeds in here. We took care of that, and we're active and keeping this a very clean and efficient garden. In this 4 by 10-foot raised bed behind me, we've got multiple different crops growing in here. We've got marigolds, zucchini, sweet peppers, Roma tomatoes, petunias, another flower growing over there, salad mix, lettuce on the other side, and celery, all growing in this one raised bed. If you're a person who only has limited space, you can grow a ton of food in a 4 by 8 or a 4 by 10 foot raised bed. I highly recommend trying to put as many different things in as you can. When I read seed packets and it says keep your crops 3 feet apart, I cut that in half. I can't say that I recommend everybody else doing that, but I like to do that because it keeps plants closer together. It shades out a lot of the weeds. It helps with a lot of different things, and you get more food usually in the process. These smaller raised beds right here with these white PVC cold frames put on top of them, these are our strawberry beds. Now, you're not going to get a ton of strawberries from the amount of plants we have right here. And we purchased 2 plants, and we ended up having way more than that because of the runners. I transplanted these from a different raised bed they were in, put the cold frames up here because we are getting strawberries, and in just a couple of weeks, I'm sure they're going to turn red. Once they turn red, the birds are going to go crazy and try to eat them. So eventually we have to put bird netting over top of these 2 raised beds. These raised beds are 5 by 4. And they're 12 inches tall, and we like them just for strawberries. Strawberries really don't like other things. This is another raised bed we have on the north side of our garden. We've got a 5 by 10 raised bed, just like the one I showed you 2 raised beds ago over there. We've got carrots growing right here for about 2 feet. This middle section is completely empty because that's where we're gonna have beets coming up hopefully soon. I don't like beets, but I know they're very good for you, except this year I purchased golden beets. And I heard that if you don't like the red kind, you might like the gold one, so we're gonna see. I did make a section in here just for that. I kind of broke my rule of purchasing seeds that we normally wouldn't purchase in the store. In other words, if we were grocery shopping, we would buy carrots, that's why we planted them here. We would buy spaghetti squash, that's why we planted them in other various locations. So here's the top-down perspective. We have carrots growing there. You can see those are coming up nicely. Petunia. By the way, when I grow flowers, I get them from the Dollar Tree, so they're very, very affordable, 25 cents a packet. This is the whole area right here from about here over to here where those golden beets should be germinating shortly. We've got a Roma tomato right there, sweet pepper, sweet pepper, sweet pepper, and sweet pepper. And then this space over here, which is a larger area, that is going to be our zucchini. Moving on to this raised bed over here, this is about 10 feet long, about 18 inches wide. I have them in between these 3 posts, 1, 2, and 3, because all 6 of these are Roma tomatoes. Once those grow up, and I do expect them to do very, very well because of the same type of Roma tomatoes we had last year. Last year we had 5 really, really good Roma tomatoes that produced the majority of our tomato sauce. This year we're growing 14, so I expect a ton of Roma tomatoes this year. But I like this raised bed because it's specifically just for these Roma tomatoes right here. And then what I do is I take this type of, it's almost like anchor rope for a boat. So it's super water resistant, it lasts a long time, it's UV resistant. I found this at a farm store, and I do the Florida weave. So I start weaving this rope in between, tie it off to here, weave it through, tie it off to there. And eventually as the plants grow, you just use more and more rope. They should get about 4.5 feet tall. They get big, these ones do, and they have huge Roma tomatoes, the biggest ones I've ever seen. I'm not sure if you've noticed or not, but every single thing, with the exception of maybe carrots and things that have not germinated yet, every single thing gets mulched. We do that for a lot of reasons, but we've got a ton of leaves around here. I pick them up my lawnmower, I put them in a pile on the north side of our yard, I put them in the chicken run, or I put them directly on top of our garden once the plants have gone in. Everything we grow here comes from seed started inside our house, then eventually put outside on our deck to harden off, and then eventually goes into our garden. So we can grow thousands of dollars of food in just a small amount of space. Then in this raised bed over here, we're now on the south side of our garden. We've got a 4x18 raised bed over here. We've got one in the middle, and we've got one further over there on that side. If I had to pick a favorite raised bed of all the raised beds we have, I think we have 13 or something. This would be the favorite one because of these teepee trellises. Again, these are just limbs that we get from harvesting firewood at our homestead. I save the limbs, I cut them to exactly 6 feet in length. I tie 3 of them together. I use jute twine because you can get them at farm stores in big rolls for really cheap, but also because you can compost it. So as I am cleaning out the garden in the fall, I take all my crops, including the twine, rip it out, throw it in the chicken compost or chicken run area, and it breaks down just fine. Last summer, this was an absolute jungle. Everything grew way up, and I actually had to cut some things off. I had to top off the tomatoes because they were growing too tall, indeterminate tomatoes. Our butternut squash grew here. We had a ton of different things going on last year. But if we zoom in here a little bit, we've got a cucumber plant right here that's going to grow up that pole right there. The rule I use is 1 crop per pole. In other words, I'm not going to grow 2 tomatoes like that to go up this pole. I'm going to grow just 1. And then I just use jute twine, just like you see here. I get a big roll of it every year. I usually go through about 1,000 feet, but it doesn't cost very much. And then at every about 12 inches, I just tie a loose loop around the plant and around the pole. Here's my little buddy, this chicken right here. She's always following me around. It's the only one. I have 19 chickens, and she follows me around the chicken run all the time. She's very curious and very friendly, and she's got a super white face for a buff Orpington. The other ones are over there hanging out in the shade, and she's over here being friendly. What I try to do is grow crops that go up and spread out and take in every little use of space right here. Back here we have spaghetti squash, cucumber. This is bumblebee purple cherry tomato. That's gonna be really fun when it grows up. They're gonna be little cherry tomatoes that are purple. We've got more celery back there, petunia, another cucumber plant. I believe that's a slicer tomato. I think it's Better Boy. More celery back there. Celery don't mind shade at all, so I'm gonna put them back there. They're gonna do just fine. We have right here another spaghetti squash. Right here in this big area, zucchini. Back there, this is actually sweet potato. You notice that I don't have any mulch directly around the sweet potatoes. I wait about 2 weeks. I just planted those out 2 days ago because sweet potatoes like really hot soil, warm soil. And by keeping the mulch off, it keeps the soil really warm. It's gonna increase plant growth and let them transplant a little bit better. I transplanted those from inside the house. Got a whole bunch of celery here. Another spaghetti squash. I need to trellis up higher. Spaghetti squash. Another slicer tomato. Another slicer tomato, spaghetti squash, and petunias over here. Then this side in this opening, a whole bunch of little flowers that are eventually going to start. You can see a lot of them have germinated. So I have this space where I put in poles several years ago, again, tree limbs from firewood that we cut. And so I decided why not use it? But this is our native soil, which is not great unless I amend it and add fertilizer and compost and do all that stuff, which I could do. But what I like about this area is that the green beans and peas do really well because they're nitrogen fixers. They add nitrogen to the soil rather than take it out. So again, we've got all of these green beans growing here. I haven't mulched it in yet. This is one of the last things I've been doing. And you can see how they're going to grow up as pole beans right on this field fencing right here. And then I just need to do a bit of weeding over here and mulch that side. I'm slightly annoyed because I've got 5-foot fencing here and I ran out when I got to this post right here. So this post to that post does not have any fencing on. Instead, what I'm going to do is use jute twine again, tie it off to this pole, to that pole about 6 inches up, and just run jute twine back and forth for these green beans in this area to grow up. We're now in the center raised bed of the south side of our garden. Again, it's 4 by 18 feet with cedar plankings on the side to hold up the raised bed. This is our brassica bed. My brassica bed is pretty much just broccoli and cabbage with a couple of other things added over there. We'll get to that in a second. But our philosophy of brassica is to get 2 harvests of broccoli each year. So we start these at the end of April, as soon as the soil is workable, or even the beginning of May, depending on the weather. So we've had these out here for about 5 weeks now, and they're doing really well. We're already starting to get a little bit of broccoli. If you're from Wisconsin, you're getting broccoli heads in June already. That means you started them at the right time, which we did this year. If you're just putting your broccoli in now, there's a good chance you're only going to get one harvest, which is why we like to start our cold weather crops, our frost tolerant crops, so early. We probably have in here about 24 broccoli plants that are doing pretty well. So to give you a different view of what you're looking at, right here is broccoli, the back side is cabbage, simply because cabbage lays a little flatter. You can tell the sun's getting high because the leaves get a little wilty with cabbage. But we got cabbage plants over here. I had a space open up right here. I don't know why, if a broccoli plant didn't make it. Decided to put a Roma tomato plant in there. The next raised bed, again 4 by 18. This is a cool raised bed as well. Over here we have a whole bunch of cabbage again because the cabbage did not fit in this raised bed right here. These are going to be really big 14-pound cabbages. We have space, so I put a Roma tomato that's going to grow up in these big cages. Now Roma tomatoes, most of them, at least the ones we get, are determinate. So we know how tall they're going to get, we know how big they're going to get. They don't grow up poles really well like this. You're going to want a cage or something to support them because they're going to bush out rather than grow tall. So right down here we've got a slicer. This is a indeterminate tomato. It's going to grow up. We interplanted a whole bunch of carrots in this empty space. Right here we have some sweet potatoes that are going to grow up this pole right here. I think we have 4 sweet potato plants. This year we did white sweet potato, orange, and purple. Our onions are doing okay. You can see them growing up right here. And some of the onions over there, they're getting some nice green tops. Petunias, more petunias, and a cucumber plant right there that's eventually going to go up. I'm just trying to give you the mindset that this is completely going to change over the next couple of months. What you see right now is just the baby stage of what this garden is going to look like shortly. So this crop right here is cantaloupe, and cantaloupe does not do well in Wisconsin or northern areas. Each year I like to try like one thing for fun, and this cantaloupe is our fun thing to try. I used to experiment all the time. Let's get watermelon, let's try this, let's try that. And it was a mistake on our homestead because we would get small harvests or no harvest at all because I wanted to experiment with exotic or cool crops that aren't really meant to be grown here. So this is our one thing that we're going to try this year. It's cantaloupe. It's doing okay, as you can see. It's about 6 inches tall. I'm hoping that we can get some fruit off of it, but if we don't, it's not a big deal because we only made one plant this year rather than taking up an entire section of our garden in our limited space. That is our 20 by 40 garden, but we do have 2 extra raised beds right there and a cattle panel trellis that I added. I had extra lumber laying around from a project we did years ago, so I decided to make 2 raised beds, 4 by 8 over here and 4 by 8 over here. This is the south side of the house, so when the sun radiates off the siding of the house, these beds get warm. So I try not to put cold weather crops here like broccoli and celery and other things. I try to put warm weather crops like tomatoes or peppers or squash or sweet potatoes because it gets so hot here off of the house. You can also see that I put a cattle panel trellis in between. I need to leave this open because we have utilities going under the ground into the house, so that it's not wise to plant anything here. Being on the south side of the house, it gets a lot of sun and it gets very warm. So in this raised bed, we have butternut squash. I haven't done any butternut squash in the main garden. I'm trying to keep them separate from the spaghetti squash in hopes that they don't cross-pollinate, but they might. To make use of our space, we have 4 butternut squash over here that'll hopefully grow up this cattle panel trellis. And we have 4 over here that will meet the others in the middle up there at the top, and hopefully they grow down. I think that's going to be really nice. In the front over here in this raised bed, we have petunia plants. I grew a whole bunch of petunias from the dollar store from seed. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 jalapeno peppers. Those are going to do well on the south side. 2 years ago, we had a ton of jalapeno peppers. And we have a whole bunch of extra green beans, the rattlesnake green beans. I didn't know what to do with all the seeds. I thought, oh, we can put them up here. They should do fine in this raised bed. But I didn't have anything to trellis them up with. So again, I'm going to use jute twine. I'm going to attach it to this piece of wood that I just nailed down to the raised bed. These green beans right here are going to grow up jute twine. So I'm going to tie off jute twine maybe to this right here, go around, just like I do in other areas where I grow things up jute twine, just to make use of this space growing green beans back here. I do expect them to grow up about 4.5 feet, cut off the tops, then they can produce more beans throughout the year. Got 10 peppers, about 8 feet of beans, 4 butternut squash plants, and some really nice petunias that are eventually going to flower and increase pollination. So we have the 4 butternut squash. We have really small onion plants that hopefully do well. Those are grown from seed inside the house. Right here we have sweet potatoes. The sweet potatoes here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then I believe I have 6 and 7 that are in the soil that are not going to be trellised. Those are just going to have to drape over the front of the raised bed right here. And then, oh, we've got another one right there. We've got more petunias, and that's a jalapeno pepper. Marigolds over there, sweet potato, those will have to go off to the side. Petunia back in the corner. There's a lot going on just in this 4x8 raised bed. My favorite feature is this fire grill ring thing that you lower over top of a fire if you want to cook over a campfire or something. I took that off because we don't use it. Then I just put this fencing on here with zip ties around this tripod. I did this last year, and the sweet potatoes did really, really well. It was actually really cool. They went right up here, they crawled right up to the top. The sweet potato slips, which you see all around over here. And so we are expecting all of these to grow up here. And then what I do when I harvest them is I just cut them off. I remove this tripod completely and I pull up the sweet potatoes right before our first frost in the fall. In this one raised bed, we've got flowers, sweet potatoes, peppers, onions, and squash. We've got 5 different crops, completely different crops. Earlier on in the video, I shared with you how we like to grow potatoes in grow bags. I don't like putting them directly in the ground. I don't like putting them in raised beds. There's a lot of reasons why. I can talk about that in a different video. However, my favorite way to grow potatoes is not actually in grow bags. Let me show you what I have behind me here, simply because I ran out of space and I didn't know where to put all of the potatoes we had this year. This is a 24 by 24 foot chicken run, deep litter method, creating compost that we can feed our garden with every fall and spring. But I didn't have room over here in our garden, and I didn't want to make more garden space and build raised beds and bring in soil, so I thought, what a better spot than plant directly into the compost that the chickens create, just planting it right here. And now we did not have chickens. This is a brand new flock. We did not have chickens here since last October. These are new chickens. I'll do a tour of the coop and the run probably in my next video or two. Anyways, I ran out of space, so I thought one of my favorite ways to grow potatoes is to lay them directly on the ground, especially if you don't have any grass there, and then cover them with leaves. So you clear an area, you put down your seed potatoes, like I did, and you just put leaves on top of them. You know, a foot of leaves at the start, they're gonna go down, then you add leaves throughout the season so that they don't turn green. And that's exactly what I did. And to keep the chickens away, I used this old fence that we used to use in their old chicken run, and then I found more 4-foot field fencing right here. Then I just hold it up over there with a shepherd's hook that doesn't have a flower on it. So just to keep things together, and it's just tied off with a rope right here. I can untie the rope, push the gate open, and come in here and do things as I need to. But all of these potatoes have come up in here, and I'm expecting to get a really big harvest. And what's nice about growing potatoes and leaves like this is in the fall, all I have to do is open up that fencing, kick out all the leaves to the chickens where they grow anyway, and then just pick up the potatoes and I'm done. There's no digging, there's no searching. You don't have to use a pitchfork to go down and get them out and you actually spike through a potato and ruin it or have to eat it right away. This is my favorite way to grow potatoes because it's so easy and it's very convenient. But last year when I grew potatoes underneath leaves like this, which was over there by those raised beds over there were gone. Those were brand new this year. What I put the potatoes in that area right there and just remove the leaves. I had more potatoes growing them that way than I've ever had in my life. More than grow bags, more than in raised beds, and more than directly in the ground in our native soil. I don't consider myself a gardener. I know a lot of people might think of me as a gardener, but I consider myself to be a well-rounded homesteader. I don't understand soil composition and the biology of it and how things break down and the different nutrients and chemicals and how all that stuff works. I really don't. I just know that things that worked for us before, I like to keep it simple, and we ended up having a really nice, clean, simple, easy, and affordable garden that anybody can put in their yard. You might not have 20 by 40 space in your backyard, but maybe you have a 20 by 10, and then the other side of your yard, you have another 20 by 10 that you can utilize. So what I like about our garden is that it's not intimidating, it's not overwhelming. There are many YouTube channels where people have been homesteading for 30 years and their entire yard's a garden and they're growing food for themselves and their community. It's very encouraging, but also if you have to start somewhere, start with a simple 4x8 or a couple 4x8 raised beds. Start growing a diverse range of crops. That's going to help with a lot of things. If you like homesteading stuff, not just gardening, because we offer a lot more than just gardening on this channel, hit the subscribe. Thanks for checking out our channel and watch these 2 videos over here because I think they're going to benefit you if you're into the homesteading self-sufficiency lifestyle. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon.